Good afternoon, and a very warm welcome to members and officers attending this special meeting of the Inverclyde Council, today, Tuesday, 4th of May 2021. Diane, do we have any apologies?
We have apologies from Councillor Chris McElhenney, Councillor Mackenzie, Councillor McVeigh and Councillor Murphy.
Thanks very much, Diane. Are there any declarations of interest?
Yes, Provost. I sit on the board of Clyde Plan, but I've taken legal advice and that won't affect my ability to take part in this determination.
Thank you. Thanks, David. No further declarations? No. Okay, we'll proceed to item two rather. The proposed residential development of circa 100 units, including 25% affordable and associated infrastructure, landscaping and open space on land at Plaintree Yetts, Kilmacombe. Now, if you'll indulge me, I'll try to put this in some form of context. The proposed development at Plaintree Yetts falls into the category of a major development. The Planning Board conducted a predetermination hearing on the proposal on Wednesday last week. At that meeting, the Board's unanimous decision was to refuse planning permission. But obviously, the story doesn't end there. This council continues to determine planning applications which have been subject to predetermination hearings. That's why we're all here today. The council can accept the recommendation of the planning board or grant planning permission subject to terms and conditions. Finally, if the council is disposed to grant a planning application, that disposal to grant is subject to a referral to the Scottish Ministers. Should there be any questions of a technical or planning nature, we have sufficient officers here to assist us and to satisfy all criteria. Now, I'll now call on Councillor Wilson David as Chair of the Planning Board to report on the first of the two predetermination hearings.
Thank you, Provost. I just have a very short preamble. As you say, the Planning Board met on the 28th of April to consider two applications by the method of WebEx video. This was a first for the Council Planning Department. There was great interest attracted in both these applications. The first one, Plaintree Yetts, attracted 258 objections, and Quarry Drive, 487. We've had a few applications in Kilmacombe. That's short of the 1,800 objections we had for NAPS when we considered it in St Columba's Church Hall. In the interest of transparency and democracy, all objectors were contacted to ask if they would like to observe the hearings. A massive task, and to this end I must thank Diane Sweeney, Lindsay Carrick, Colin MacDonald and Jim Kerr for the work they put in. They were on the ball the whole time and the whole event went very smoothly. I would also like to thank Alan MacDonald, who was present the whole time with his staff, to make sure that the IT worked well, and it did. We also had other councillors observing the proceedings. In terms of how well it went, we actually received compliments, or Mr. Kerr did, from both applicants, saying they were extremely satisfied with the way the hearing was conducted, in spite of it having to be by video. The Planning Board considered the application at Plaintree Yetts. Officer's recommendation was to refuse, and this was decided unanimously by the board. The Planning Board recommends refusal. Councillor Nelson, would you endorse that that was what happened?
Yes, I will endorse that that's what happened, and I'll...
Thank you very much. Provost, I pass back to your good self. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, David. Does any member here wish to make a contribution to debate?
Provost.
Provost, yes, I am Provost. Yes. Jim, is it
Yeah.
Councillor McLeany? Right. On you
Yeah.
go, Jim.
Provost, can I just establish through our legal advisors as to the protocol for this procedure? I take it that anyone who wishes to make a contribution should only be those who either are on the planning board at that particular meeting or those who observed that particular meeting and have done the relevant training. Can I have that established, please?
Anne, would you like to? I think Jim's question is directed towards yourself.
Yes, thank you very much, Provost. Councillor McElhenney, I can confirm that it was the decision of the Council in February 2020 that only those members who had been present at the predetermination hearing and had undertaken the mandatory training could vote at a council to determine the outcome of a predetermination hearing. However, other members could still participate in the debate, could make comment or representation. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And does that clarify matters for you, Jim?
Just the follow-up question is that is there any members present not done the training?
I don't know that I need to go into that, Councillor McElhenney. However, I confirm that if the time comes where I require to take a vote, then I will, of course, only ask those members who are entitled to vote in terms of the agreed protocol. So that is a matter that will be taken into account. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Anne. So there will be no naming. Could we, Councillor Brooks?
Thanks very much, Provost. Could I just ask officers to confirm that the local development plan has the land Pine Tree Yetts as greenbelt land and it is not available for development? Is that the stance of the Council's local development plan?
Thanks, Graham. I'm going to direct that either to Stuart, whom I don't see, Anne or Jim. Jim, would you answer? Is Stuart there? No?
Provost, I am here.
Oh, I see, right. So am I, right.
Thank you, Provost.
Stuart.
The Local Development Plan 2019 adopted plan does not have Plane Tree Yetts as Greenbelt, and the Local Development Plan proposed plan does not have Plane Tree Yetts as Greenbelt.
See. Answer your question then, Graham. Yes. Stephen?
My question was really along the lines that Councillor McElhenney was asking, was just to confirm how many members of the council today would be eligible to participate or to vote in any decisions we make today.
Can you give a number, Anne?
Apologies, I was on mute. There was only one member who has not completed training. In relation to the application for Plane Tree Yetts, I note an additional 4 members who are not entitled to vote. I also note apologies from Councillors Mackenzie and McVeigh. Does that assist?
Stephen? Does that help you?
I'll do the arithmetic in my head, yeah.
Councillor Curley. Chris?
Thank you, Provost. It was just, I must misheard what they call it, Stuart. Did he say that the Plane Tree Yetts was not in the Greenbelt in the adopted plan and the proposed plan?
I think that's a question for Stuart. Stuart, did you hear the question?
Through you, Provost. Plaintree Yetts in the adopted local development plan is Greenbelt. Plaintree Yetts in the local development plan, proposed plan, is Greenbelt.
So, Chris, Greenbelt in both cases.
Thank you.
Answer
I just
yes.
misheard. I just misheard.
Right. No, that's fine. That's fine. Are there any further questions or contributions? We are lacking a motion at the moment.
Promise, I'm happy to move that the council supports the recommendation from the planning board to refuse planning permission and on the grounds set in the reasons set out in the report.
Thanks, Stephen. Is there a seconder for Stephen? Jim, right? Okay,
Yes, Provost, I'm happy to second that proposal.
Right. Okay. Okay, now we have a proposal, we've got a seconder. Are there any amendments? I take it there are no amendments. So the decision of the council is to refuse the application. Is that correct?
Correct.
Correct. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much, my fellow members. We will move on now to agenda item 3. A residential development on land west of Quarry Drive, Kilmacombe. Again, this is a major development. The planning board considered this matter last week at last week's predetermination hearings. After a roll call, the application was approved by the members. That vote was 9-2 in favour of permission being granted, in principle, subject to a number of conditions. But as stated earlier, this council continues to determine planning applications which have been subject to predetermination hearings. The council can accept the recommendation of the planning board or it can refuse planning permission. Again, David, Councillor Wilson, could you report on last week's predetermination hearing?
Thank you, Provost. Colleagues, can I take you, first of all, to page 47 in your agenda papers? At page 47, 48, 49, 50, 51, 52, and 53, we have the summary of this application as prepared by our colleagues in legal, Anne Sinclair and Jim Kerr. Officer's recommendation was to grant permission subject to conditions. The planning board, having listened to various arguments, recommended that the application be approved by a vote of 9-2. Councillor Nelson, would you endorse that was a result of the planning board considerations?
Yes, I will endorse it. That was the decision of the planning board.
Provost, I hand back to you. The decision of the planning board was to approve the recommendation.
Thank you. As David said, the decision of the planning board, the roll call vote was 9-2 in favour of granting the application. But it's down to us now. Are there any members who wish to make a contribution or propose acceptance or whatever? I've got a question. I've got Councillor McCabe. Stephen.
Yeah, it's not a question, Provost. I want to propose a motion. We're considering two very similar applications for housing developments in the Greenbelt around Kilmacombe this afternoon. In fact, the two proposed development sites are immediately adjacent. Earlier, the council unanimously supported the recommendation of the planning board to refuse permission for the proposed development at Plaintree Yetts for 8 reasons detailed in the report before us. Most, if not all, of those reasons for refusal could equally apply to the proposed development at land west of Quarry Drive, the application we're now considering. The only fundamental difference between the two proposed developments is that one site has been included in the proposed local development plan and the other is not. At the Environment and Regeneration Committee on the 13th April 2021, I moved that the land west of Quarry Drive should not be included in the proposed local development plan. Disappointingly, my motion was defeated by 9 votes to 1 with 1 abstention. However, Provost, my view has not changed since the 13th of April. I cannot support housing development at this location, and accordingly I move that the application for planning permission is refused for the following reasons. 1, the proposal is contrary to the Clyde Plan Strategic Development Plan and significantly contrary to the adopted 2019 Inverclyde Local Development Plan due to the site being located within land identified as Green Belt. 2, the identified indicative shortfall of approximately 100 units in the Inverclyde part of the Renfrewshire housing submarket area is not sufficient justification for a development in the Greenbelt. It is considered that the surplus of land that exists in the wider Renfrewshire housing submarket area could be utilised to address said shortfall. I have provided the committee officers with the terms of my motion, and they may well be able to put it in the chat for you, Provost, and other members. And I believe that Councillor McElhenney, Jim, would be willing to second the motion.
Jim.
Thanks, Provost. Thanks, Councillor McCabe. Yeah, those of you who took in the hearing last week, you've heard my comments to say that I struggled to looking at the first Plaintree Yetts application and then the Quarry Drive. There was a number of officers' paragraphs to me, it looks like cut and paste. I couldn't see when we got to the end that they were forming a different recommendation. So it struck me there was only a few succinct wee tweaks and a few different wordings put in it. So I struggled to see why we formed that opinion. I take on board that it could have been viewed as the worst of 2 evils. So we've got to build houses somewhere, then the officers may well have thought, well that's the least worst case scenario. But having said that, I moved refusal last week. I was one of the 2, and I'm quite happy to second Councillor McCabe's motion to refuse.
Thank you very much, Jim. I think before we go much further, I have absolutely no expertise in planning. It's one of a large number of areas where I find myself deficient. But is Stuart, Mr. Jimison, would you care to comment on this? Both Councillors McCabe and McElhenney have said more or less that they can't see why one proposal is being accepted, yet the other refused because they feel the applications are similar.
Provost, we need to be careful not to draw officers into a political debate. The facts of the matter is Mr. Jimison put forward 2 reports to 2 separate predetermination hearings. Both of those were attended by members of the planning board, most members of the planning board. They were attended by other councillors like myself as observers. We've heard all the questions that were asked and the responses that were given. We heard from the applicants, we heard from those who had made representation. So we've been provided with all the factual information that we asked for. And as far as I'm concerned, planning is an area where there is subjective judgment, right? And we are now in the midst of a political debate. So I'd be very careful of going down the area of asking questions until
It's not
we
political.
know if there's going to be an alternative motion.
Provost, through you, the position is that this is the council meeting in order to consider the application afresh. The council has been asked to look at the decision of the predetermination hearings, and therefore the view of legal services is that it is appropriate for members to ask questions of officers and for these issues to be fully ventilated in order that members can consider their position and decide whether or not they wish to vote in favour of Councillor McCabe or put up any alternative amendment.
So I'm very aware of your feelings, your sentiments on this, Stephen, but I would still ask Stuart to elaborate. Stuart.
Provost, through you. Provost, we formed the 2019 Local Development Plan, and Chapter 7 of the housing of the Local Development Plan was quashed in the Court of Session. And the reason that the chapter was quashed was because we didn't have an effective land supply for housing. Following that decision in the Court of Session, officers have, through the auspices of the Environment Regeneration Committee and the Council, provided updates and a solution as to how we within Inverclyde can ensure that our housing land is considered appropriately by producing an interim document, a main issues report, and now a proposed plan. Councillor McElhenny's comments about a cut and paste job are not quite accurate because each application was considered under its own merits, but you'll recognise that the legislation relating to both applications is identical. Indeed, many of the points in the report you could have seen it swing one way. The scenario that we find ourselves in is a material consideration, as Councillor McCabe pointed out, that on the 13th of April, the Environment and Regeneration Committee acknowledged that there was a requirement for housing land within Inverclyde. There was a shortfall of approximately 100 units, and by providing the West of Quarry Drive site, that would allow us to move forward in addressing that shortfall. That's the simple facts, Provost. It is simply that the local development plan, proposed plan, identifies a shortfall within Inverclyde. We've identified that there were two sites within our main issues report. Having looked at the changes in legislation, having carried out a fresh housing land audit, it was appropriate for us to identify a site. The reason that the West of Quarry Drive site is the preferred option is simply that it has less visual impact on the village, it has less visual amenity impact, and it also protects potential erosion of the greenbelt. The two sites need to stand on their own merit. The West of Quarry Drive site is the one which is being considered by the council this afternoon, having already determined the outcome of the Plaintree Yett site, and it is that which members should be focused on.
Thank you, Stuart. Graham, Councillor Brooks.
Thanks very much, Provost. Could I have clarity, I think from Stuart, that if the application before us today was to be rejected by the council, what would be the journey for the company who's making the application for this planning permission, or sorry, outlining planning permission? Obviously, I'm not involved in planning, but I get nervous when I hear stories about the council getting beat by QCs at courts. So I just want to understand what the journey would be for the applicant should we turn this down this afternoon.
Stuart, can you add?
You'll understand that there are two parallel processes going on just now. So there's the proposed plan and there is also the applications which are before us. In respect of the application before us, were the council today to reject the application, then the applicant would have right of appeal to the to Scottish ministers.
Yeah, thank you, Graham. Thank you, Stuart. Councillor Carley. Councillor Carley.
Thank you, Provost. Obviously, I was part of the planning board who made a decision, and obviously we're weighing up all the material considerations on the day. And one of the material considerations is obviously the proposed plan and the effect that it has on what do you call it, any planning application. Obviously, the proposed plan, which is going to be going out for consultation, has identified that Quarry Drive is the preferred site for housing, to identifying a need, a housing shortfall in the area of the Renfrewshire sub-housing market that is within Inverclyde. Now, obviously, this has been through Clyde Plan, etc., and has identified 200 homes that have to be provided within this small area in Inverclyde. The way it works out, effectively, this means that such housing would effectively has to be provided in Kilmacole or Quarriers. And as has been discussed earlier, this is the council. The previous plan came unstuck, and what do you call it, the housing section was removed, as far as my understanding of the situation. I think it comes down to this is, and I think Councillor John Kohler, he asked this question on regard to the Plaintree Yett site, but I suppose it's pertinent to ask this question again with respect to the Quarry Drive site, because of the fact that there's been correspondence received by myself and other councillors relating to whether or not that we need to provide this, that we actually need to provide the individual, what do you call it, housing down to the level that we're doing within the report, i.e. 200 homes have to be provided in Inverclyde. Can officers give comment on the ability of Inverclyde Council to decide where those 200 homes are, what we call, are provided, and whether or not there is flexibility within Clyde Plan for them to be provided elsewhere?
Thanks, Chris. There are a number of officers here, but I think I'll refer your question to Stuart once again. It was about the 200 houses.
Provost, I think it's important to consider that we identified that there wasn't a housing shortfall within Inverclyde within the 2019 plan, following the discussions which took place at the Environment Regeneration Committee. Officers have robustly defended that position. However, things have moved on. First of all, in the Court of Session, the Lords said that the Clyde Plan is immutable, i.e. it cannot be changed. So within Clyde Plan, it identifies that there were 200 houses identified within the Renfrewshire submarket area. There have been a number of changes which have taken place in terms of legislation going forward. My chief executive will cringe when I recall that I said that there were probably I've had more hot dinners than there are ways of cutting the housing figures. However, there are more ways of cutting the housing figures than I've had hot dinners. The scenario that we find ourselves in is that we as officers have got to attempt to address a Renfrewshire housing submarket area. We've got to consider the Inverclyde housing market area. And on top of that, we also have to consider the Inverclyde authority area, which is a new change. So shortfalls which can be identified within Inverclyde can be met from anywhere within Inverclyde. By identifying Quarry Drive, we've attempted to resist any potential further release of Greenbelt. The Quarry Drive site, if you look at your agendas at the beginning of an appendix, you will see that it is filling in a gap in respect of the geography within Kilmacole, whereas the Plaintree Yett site is way beyond that. So hopefully Councillor, I've answered your question, but the scenario that we find ourselves in is that there is a shortfall. We've identified a shortfall within the Kilmacombe and Quarriers Renfrewshire submarket area of approximately 100 units. And this site, along with the other two sites that were identified in the papers, namely Craigbet, and I've forgotten the other one, they bring that shortfall very close to zero.
Thank you, Stuart. I'm now going to contact Jim MacLeod, Councillor MacLeod. Jim, do you wish to contribute to the debate?
The only thing I would say, Provost, is that reading through the papers, it was good to note a couple of things that, you know, wheelchair accessible housing is being considered, albeit, you know, they prefer to see a higher percentage. And the other thing about the 20 mile an hour reduction, looking at it in a new development, and if it goes ahead, of course, depending on today's decision. But, you know, it'd be good to see that happening in future new developments as well. Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah, we do.
Jim?
Yes.
Do you want me, do you want Stuart to speak on that?
No, it was just a comment.
No? Right, thanks very much, Jim. Thank you. Now, I have, Graham, have you already spoken in this part of the debate?
I have. I would like clarification whether I could ask a second question.
No, you, the is a full council and the debate, and you can speak only once, but I'll make sure that I'm on firm ground with that. Anne, could you help me?
Yes, Provost, you are correct. Each member may only speak once, other than the proposer of a motion or amendment. Thank you.
Provost, with all due respect, we're not actually having a debate at the moment because there isn't two motions to debate. I think we are having questions, and presumably after the questions, somebody's going to move an alternative to the motion that I've moved.
Okay, thanks, Stephen. Back to you, Anne, for an authoritative ruling.
Thank you, Provost. I would take the view that this is an open debate. As I said earlier, I consider that this is a full meeting of the council, and all issues in relation to these applications are being ventilated and looked at afresh. So I think the normal rules regarding a council meeting would apply.
Right, thank you, Anne. I'll bow to your superior knowledge. Lynn?
I was going to say to Graham, he could have sent me his question. I would have asked his as well. Yeah, so I mean, I don't want to go into questions about the specific planning application here. I've just got a sort of question about the sort of process where we've arrived here. So I'm just trying to tease out that by actually having this committee here, are we somewhat undermining the decision of the planning committee? Because we've already had a planning committee where they've voted and made a decision, and then we're finding ourselves here in effect a political debate. When we've already went through planning, you know, the idea of having a planning committee within this council is for that committee to have a regular meeting which examines a number of planning applications, so they make a decision in a wider Inverclyde context. So I would argue that they have the skills. Now we're kind of thrown in here, not a member of the Environment Regeneration would have really not approved the local development plan, not been a member of planning, and suddenly be into a political debate and having a discussion on a planning issue, which are really complex issue. So I'm really just questioning this process. Is this the right place to have these decisions? And are we really undermining our planning committee?
Then I'm going to refer that to legal, but we had this discussion, I think, over a year ago, and the full council agreed that we would do this with predetermination hearings. As I remember, the motion was that along the lines that you suggest, that the planning board had the skills and expertise to decide these matters, but I'm afraid the full council said that predetermination hearings, which had gone one way or the other, had to be referred back. And
Yes, thank you, Provost. That is correct. It was the decision of the council in February 2020 that major applications at a predetermination hearing would be referred to the full council for a deliberation. Thank you.
Yeah, I think just on that point, I think it's one of those where you see it in paper, but when you actually now see it in practice, you know, the actual issue with it's coming to the fore now when we've got this, you know, application. So it's fine seeing something in paper in a process, but this is now real life. So I just wanted to voice those concerns that I have.
Yes, and you know, I agree with much of what you say, Lynn, but the real life, the reality is that the council decided that predetermination hearings had to be referred to the full council, and then there was training, and almost all the councillors took part in the planning training, and we have arrived here today because of that. Jim?
Yeah, thanks, Provost. Just a couple of points, and then I'm happy to move an amendment, because I could see all the other members are looking to see who's going to move the amendment. So I'm happy to do it, because I recognise that it was Councillor McVeigh at the original planning meeting that put the motion forward, and unfortunately he's not here today. My only comment is we've got to be careful when Stephen and Lynn, to a lesser extent, talk about political. We are not here as members of political parties, very much along the lines of the planning committee itself. We're here as individual councillors. This is not a party political matter in any way. So I think it's important, because if anybody's looking into that, then they might think, oh, is this going to be along party lines? We are here purely as individual councillors. Now, from my time on the planning board, if people who have served with me on the planning board will know that I'm one of the people who speak up most loudly in favour of the Greenbelt, and constantly all the time I vote in the way to secure the Greenbelt. However, what we've got to do is look at this, look at what we've done under the local development plan, look at what happened at the Environment and Regeneration meeting, and actually say there has now been a change. We've been to the quarter session. We know the situation we're in as a council. So therefore, for me, I'm actually happy to move an amendment on the recommendation that was agreed at the planning board. Thanks, convener. Thanks, Provost.
Thanks, Jim. Is there a seconder?
I'm quite happy to second that, Provost.
Right. Thanks very much, Elizabeth. Right. Before we proceed further, I understand that Councillor Nelson wishes to comment.
Sorry, Provost, all I was going to do was second, actually.
I see. Right. Are there any further contributions from any member? Robert?
I pause. I mean, I fully understand that we're in a political debate here, and I think in a lot of ways, you know, everybody is, nobody get the advantage here, because those who didn't take part in the actual meeting actually observed it, so they knew everything that went on and all the arguments taking place and all the objections. But in the objections, we have to remember, Provost, there was some of the community in Kilmacombe who were very much in favour of this. And when I had spoken at a meeting, I was surprised that the Kilmacombe Community Council was one of the organisations who supported it, because they said that they needed more affordable housing for people who live in Kilmacombe. And also, the reason I supported it too, because our officers recommended it. That was two really important reasons that made me go for this. And I think we should take cognizance of the planning board decision, and when we're voting, we should think the debate took place before today, Provost.
Thank you very much, Robert. As far as I can gather from the chat list, no member wishes to comment or question. Is that correct? Okay. If that is the case, I think we can proceed to a vote.
Provost, could I exercise my right to respond? Since I'm the mover of the motion.
Yes, of course. But I didn't know if I wanted Anne to specify how this is going to be done. Okay.
Thank you, Provost. Provost, if there are no other amendments, then I think it would be appropriate for Councillor McCabe to sum up, and then for Councillor Clogherty to sum up in relation to the amendments, and then I can proceed to the vote. If it would assist Councillor McCabe, I can read out your motion, if that would assist.
I think it would.
Okay. So Councillor McCabe's motion, which is seconded by Councillor Jim McElhenny, is that the application for planning permission is refused for the following reasons. 1, the proposal is contrary to the Clyde Plan, Strategic Development Plan, and significantly contrary to the adopted 2019 Inverclyde Local Development Plan due to the site being located within land identified as Greenbelt. 2, the identified indicative shortfall of approximately 100 units in the Inverclyde part of the Renfrewshire housing submarket area is not sufficient justification for a development in the Green Belt. It is considered that the surplus of land that exists in the wider Renfrewshire housing submarket area should be utilised to address said shortfall. And I have noted that Councillor Clogherty, seconded by Councillor Robertson, has put forward an amendment to that motion to accept the recommendation of the predetermination hearing. Thank you, Provost.
Thank you, and possibly I should have done this earlier. Stephen, would you like to sum up?
Yeah, I mean, I think we do need to reflect on how we handle these particular matters, Provost. Both in terms of whether we are content with the procedure which was agreed by the council, which wasn't the original recommendation of officers, I have to say, but we did agree that, and we've went through that process, and those of us who are not members of the planning board and who hadn't had training undertook training in advance of the predetermination hearings. We attended the predetermination hearings as observers, and we've read the reports, etc. So we're perfectly at liberty under the council's procedures to obviously participate in this particular debate. But in terms of how we've handled it, maybe we should reflect on it and say we should have questions. And when the council sits and deals with what is explicitly a committee matter, we do allow more than one question to be asked. We should have questions, and then once we've had questions, go into a debate where there's motions and amendments. So we need to think about that. And it isn't a political debate in terms of being a party political debate, as Councillor Clogherty has pointed out, but it's a political debate because we are politicians and our officers are not politicians, so we are in a political debate. But planning is a quasi-judicial matter. My group does not, and I'm sure no other group takes group decisions on planning, so it's an entirely free vote as far as we are concerned. I mean, Councillor Moran makes a point about there being a demand for affordable housing in Kilmacombe. That may well actually be the case, and that is not actually being properly addressed necessarily through either the local housing strategy or the local development plan. But if the need for affordable housing outweighed the protection of the green belt, then the planning board should have approved the planning application for Plaintree Yetts as well as the planning application for Quarry Drive. The reality is that we're running scared of the Court of Session, we're running scared of developers, and to play a numbers game and avoid getting taken to court, we want to free up a site in Kilmacombe to offset that. as far as I'm concerned, there is no justification for releasing land in the Greenbelt at this point in time. That's the position that is there in our adopted local plan. And the need to free up circa 100 units in Kilmacombe to tick the box when it comes to the numbers isn't sufficient justification as far as I'm concerned, when there is a surplus of available land within the wider Renfrewshire housing submarket. And Kilmacombe and Quarriers is not viewed as part of the Inverclyde market, it's viewed as part of the Renfrewshire market. Therefore, the shortfall can be addressed within the Renfrewshire market without the need to release land in the Greenbelt around Kilmacombe. Thanks, Provost.
Thanks very much, Stephen. Jim, would you like to speak in favour of your amendment?
Yeah, I'm going to be very brief. Members will be glad to hear. Just a couple of comments. I don't want to bring in more things, but I suppose one comment I'd make at the end up, and it was with regard to the objectors. The objectors are, you know, they mentioned the meadows. We had a young lady on doing a very emotional bit, so we do understand how close the meadows are to the people of Kilmacombe, and we do understand how these issues do raise the heckles and get the blood boiling. But what we've got to do, we've got to look at it rationally. And we've got to look at the reports that our officers have put in front of us. We've got to take cognizance of any legal proceedings that have been put against us in the past. And those of us who are on the planning board, this isn't the first predetermination meeting we've sat through. And I'm hoping that it's going to be the last, because I'm hoping that with this, we do an awful lot of answer a lot of the questions that have been put onto us with regard to the housing supply in Kilmacombe. And that's really why I'm happy to put this forward as an amendment, because I think it is the right thing to do. And I'm hoping that once we do this, it will be, although there's no guarantees, but it will be the end of the Kilmacombe housing question. Thanks, Provost.
Thank you, Jim. Now, we're going to proceed to a vote. Anne, would you conduct the vote?
I shall, Provost. Thank you very much. The motion is Councillor McCabe's motion. I'm happy to read it again if that was necessary. Is everyone happy? And the amendment is the amendment put forward by Councillor Clockerty to approve the decision of the predetermination hearing, subject of course to the matter being referred to the Scottish Ministers, which she alluded to earlier, Provost. I will now have a roll call of members. Councillor Affeld. Councillor Affeld, can I ask if you vote for the motion? That's Councillor McCabe's motion to refuse the recommendation of the Planning Board at the predetermination hearing, or do you vote for Councillor Clockerty's amendment?
I will abstain.
Okay. Thank you. Provost, can I ask if you support Councillor McCabe's motion to refuse
Can I phone you back? I'm in a meeting.
Apologies, Provost. Can I ask if you support the motion, which is Councillor McCabe's motion, or the amendment, that's Councillor Clockerty's amendment?
Amendment.
Thank you. Councillor Brooks.
Amendment.
Thank you. Councillor Clockerty.
Amendment.
Councillor Curley. Councillor Curley, are you with us?
Yes. Motion.
Just while you're motion, thank you. And I should have said at the outset, and apologies, I should have emphasised that I am only asking those members who are entitled to vote. That is, members who were present at the predetermination hearing and have completed the mandatory training. I'll continue. Councillor Dorian, can I come to you next, please? Do you support the motion or the amendment?
Amendment.
Thank you. Councillor McCabe, do you support the motion or the amendment?
Motion, please.
Thank you. Councillor Jim McElhenney, do you support Councillor McCabe's motion or Councillor Clockerty's amendment?
Motion.
Thank you. Councillor Moran, I come to you now. Do you support Councillor McCabe's motion or Councillor Clockerty's amendment?
Amendment.
Thank you. Councillor Murphy, do you support the motion or amendment? Oh, apologies. Yes,
Is
no
the Councillor
attendance.
Murphy not intimated apologies?
I think that's my oversight. I'll move on. Councillor Nelson, do you support the motion or the amendment?
Amendment.
Councillor Quinn, do you support the motion or the amendment?
I would like to abstain. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Rebecca, can I come to you? Do you support Councillor McCabe's motion or the amendment?
Amendment.
Thank you. Councillor Robertson, do you support the motion or amendment?
Amendment.
And finally, Councillor Wilson, do you support the motion or the amendment?
Councillor Wilson's not available to speak. He's on his way over to speak through my machine.
My mute was not working. Motion. Thank you, Provost.
Motion. Okay, thank you. Now, if you would just bear with me while I have a note. Okay. I note that there are 4 votes in favour of Councillor McCabe's motion. I have 2 abstentions and 8 votes in favour of Councillor Clockerty's amendment. The amendment rather is granted.
The amendment is granted.
So the recommendation of the Planning Board at the predetermination hearing is approved by the full council, subject to the caveat that the matter requires to be referred to the Scottish ministers. Thank you.
Thanks. The Planning Board's decision was endorsed by the full council. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. I must say, I'm not on the Planning Board, but I must say I was most impressed when I attended it, and not only that, by the knowledgeable contributions of members today. Thank you all very much, and good afternoon.